The winter night pressed against the windows of Bernard's diner like a living thing, cold and insistent. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with a sound that had become white noise to Nora Ashford, who moved between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to be invisible. Her apron was stained with coffee and pie filling. Her feet ached in shoes held together with super glue, and her hair, dark and pulled into a tight bun, felt like it was trying to escape her skull. She was 26 years old and drowning in slow motion. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried onions, and the vinyl booths were cracked in places where the foam showed through like exposed bone. The clock above the register said 10:47, which meant she had another hour and 13 minutes before she could lock the doors and walk the 6 blocks to the apartment she shared with her sister Rosie. Another hour of smiling at men who didn't tip and cleaning tables that would just get dirty again, and pretending that this was temporary, that something better was waiting just around the corner. It wasn't. She knew that now. This was her life. But tonight, something was different. Sebastian Cross sat in booth 7, the one by the window that overlooked the alley where the dumpsters lived. He'd been there for 2 hours, nursing a single cup of coffee that had gone cold 90 minutes ago. He wore a suit that cost more than Nora made in 3 months, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, and his hands, scarred across the knuckles, decorated with ink that disappeared beneath starched white cuffs, rested on the table like he was trying to keep them from doing something they wanted to do. His face was the kind that made people nervous, not because it was cruel, but because it was controlled. Every muscle held in check, every expression measured and deliberate. His eyes were storm gray, and they followed Nora across the room with the steady attention of someone cataloging information, building files, assessing vulnerabilities. She'd noticed him the moment he walked in. You couldn't not notice a man like that. He carried violence the way other men carried cologne, invisible but unmistakable, something that changed the air around him. Nora refilled his coffee without asking, her hand steady even though her pulse wasn't. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her voice professionally flat. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment. His gaze didn't feel sexual. It felt surgical, like he was looking past her skin, past her uniform, straight down to whatever lived in her bones. "Not yet," he said quietly. His voice was low and controlled, carrying weight instead of volume, the kind of voice that made you lean in to hear it, that made silence feel like anticipation. Nora nodded and turned away, her heart beating just slightly too fast. She'd seen enough dangerous men to recognize one when he sat in her section. The neighborhood attracted them. This part of the city where the streetlights only worked half the time, where sirens were background music, where people learned not to ask questions about things that weren't their business. But Sebastian Cross wasn't like the others. He didn't swagger or posture. He simply existed, and existence was enough. Outside, through the grimy window, Nora could see Vincent huddled in the doorway of the closed pawn shop across the street. He'd been there when she started her shift at 4, and he'd be there when she left at midnight. He was maybe 60, maybe 70. It was hard to tell when the street aged you faster than years. His beard was long and matted, his coat held together with safety pins and hope, and his eyes were the tired brown of someone who'd stopped expecting kindness. Nora had known Vincent for almost 2 years. She didn't know his last name or where he came from, or what had brought him to this particular corner of this particular city. She just knew that he was there, day after day, invisible to almost everyone who passed. Not to her. She glanced toward the kitchen. Bernard, the owner, a man with a permanent scowl and a heart that had calcified somewhere around 1987, was in the back office doing paperwork. The cook had his earbuds in, moving to music only he could hear. June, the other waitress, was on her smoke break, standing in the alley and staring at her phone like it held answers to questions she hadn't figured out how to ask yet. Nora moved quickly. She grabbed a to-go container from the stack beneath the counter and filled it methodically. Meatloaf from the dinner special that hadn't sold. Mashed potatoes with gravy. Green beans that were slightly overcooked but still edible. 2 dinner rolls. A slice of apple pie with a crack in the crust that made it unsellable but perfectly good. She closed the container, slipped it into a plastic bag, and walked toward the door. She didn't see Sebastian's expression change. Didn't see the way his fingers stopped their rhythmic tapping on the table. Didn't see Callum standing near the entrance in a black coat that concealed a body built for damage, straighten almost imperceptibly, his hand moving instinctively toward his waist before Sebastian made a small gesture that meant stand down. The cold hit Nora the moment she stepped outside. December in the city was brutal, the kind of cold that cut through fabric and found skin, that turned breath to fog and made bones ache. She crossed the empty street, her shoes clicking on pavement, wet from earlier rain, and approached the doorway where Vincent sat. He looked up as she approached, his eyes roomy and red-rimmed, and something like recognition flickered across his face. Not hope, just recognition. The understanding that she was one of the few who still saw him. Nora knelt down, ignoring the puddle soaking through her jeans, ignoring the cold concrete against her knees, and held out the bag. "It's still hot," she said softly. "There's pie, too." Vincent's hands, shaking filthy, covered in sores that probably needed antibiotics he couldn't afford, reached out and took the bag. He held it like it was something precious, like it was proof that he still existed. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse and cold. "You need to see a doctor," Nora said, even though she knew he wouldn't. "That cough is getting worse." Vincent shook his head slowly. "Can't afford it. They don't—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "People like me, we don't get to be sick." Nora's chest ached. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. It was supposed to go toward Rosie's new winter coat. Her sister was 15 and growing fast, and Chicago winters didn't care about tight budgets. But Vincent's cough sounded like something breaking, and Nora couldn't walk away from that. She pressed the bill into his hand. "For medicine, please." Vincent stared at the money, like it might vanish. His eyes filled with tears that he blinked back furiously. "I can't—" "You can. You will." Nora's voice was gentle but firm. "Get something for that cough, okay?" Vincent nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging his throat. Nora stood, her knees protesting, her hands numb from the cold. She wanted to say more, wanted to fix the unfixable, but she had 13 minutes left on her break, and Bernard would dock her pay if she was late, and the world didn't stop turning just because it was cruel. She walked back across the street, back into the diner's fluorescent warmth, and nearly collided with Sebastian Cross. He was standing just inside the door, and up close, he was taller than she'd realized, broader. The air around him felt different, denser, charged with something she couldn't name. His cologne was subtle, expensive, something with cedar and smoke. His eyes were level with hers, and they weren't cold exactly, just careful, controlled. "Excuse me," Nora said, stepping around him. Sebastian didn't move. "You do that every night?" It wasn't a question. It was an observation stated as fact. Nora met his gaze steadily. "Do what?" "Feed him. Give him money you don't have." Her jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Sebastian's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I've been watching you for 3 nights. You do it every shift. Take food that should go in the trash and give it to someone everyone else pretends doesn't exist. Give him money that's supposed to go somewhere else, somewhere you need it more." Nora's heart kicked against her ribs. "Why do you care?" "I'm trying to figure that out." The honesty in his voice was more unsettling than any threat. There was no malice in it, no agenda. Just genuine confusion, like he'd encountered something that didn't fit into his understanding of how the world worked. "Well, figure it out somewhere else," Nora said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I have tables to clear." She moved past him, her shoulder brushing his arm, and felt something electric in the contact. Not attraction exactly, recognition, like touching a live wire, and realizing too late that the current was already running through you. Sebastian didn't follow her. He just returned to booth 7 and sat down, his coffee still untouched, his attention still fixed on her like she was a puzzle he'd decided to solve. Nora tried to ignore him, tried to focus on the work, clearing tables, refilling coffee, processing checks, smiling at customers who didn't see her as anything more than a uniform and a service. But she could feel his gaze on her, heavy and deliberate, and it made her skin prickle with awareness. When she left at midnight, pulling on her thin coat and stepping out into the brutal cold, she found a black town car idling at the curb. The back window rolled down, and Sebastian's face appeared in the dim interior light. "Get in," he said, quietly. "No. It's not safe for you to walk home alone at this hour." "I've been walking home alone at this hour for 2 years. I'll survive one more night." Sebastian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect? Maybe. Or interest. "Your sister Rosie has a field trip next week to the Museum of Science and Industry. $45. You're short 23. Your landlord raised the rent last month without warning. You're 4 weeks behind. You work doubles 6 days a week and you're still drowning." Nora's blood went cold. "How do you know?" "Because I pay attention." Sebastian leaned forward slightly. "Because when something interesting crosses my path, I learn everything about it." "I'm not a thing." "No, you're not." He paused. "Get in the car, Nora. Let me drive you home. That's all. Just a ride." "I don't get into cars with strangers. My name is Sebastian Cross. I own 17 businesses in this city, including 3 that are completely legal. I have a daughter who would have been 8 this year if she'd lived. I take my coffee black, and I've been coming to this diner every night for 3 nights because I'm trying to understand something that doesn't make sense." He met her gaze steadily. "Now I'm not a stranger. I'm just someone offering you a ride home in the cold." Nora wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed to say no, but her feet ached, and the cold was brutal, and there was something in his voice, something honest and raw, that made her hesitate. "Just a ride," she said finally. "Nothing else." "Just a ride." She got in the car. The interior was warm and smelled like leather. Callum was driving, his eyes watching her in the rear view mirror with the flat assessment of a man trained to identify threats. Sebastian sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, but not touching, careful to maintain space. "Where to?" Callum asked. Nora gave him the address, and the car pulled away from the curb smoothly, moving through empty streets with the kind of confidence that came from knowing no one would stop you. They rode in silence for several blocks. Then Sebastian spoke, his voice low. "Why did you give him the money?" "Because he needed it. You need it too. Not as much as he does." Sebastian was quiet for a moment. "Most people would say you're being foolish, that you can't save everyone, that you should take care of yourself first." "Most people walk past Vincent like he's invisible," Nora said quietly. "I don't want to be most people." Something shifted in Sebastian's expression, something that looked almost like pain. "My daughter used to say things like that. She'd see someone struggling and she'd want to fix it, want to make it better." He paused. "She died 4 years ago. Leukemia. 7 years old." Nora's breath caught. "I'm sorry. I built an empire trying to give her everything, power, protection, security, and none of it mattered when the thing that killed her couldn't be bought or threatened or destroyed." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the cracks beneath. "I've been trying to figure out what matters ever since. And then I saw you kneel in the cold to feed a homeless man, and I thought, maybe you knew something I didn't." The car pulled up in front of Nora's building, a rundown walk-up with boarded windows on the 2nd floor and graffiti on the brick. She reached for the door handle, then stopped. "I don't know anything," she said quietly. I'm just trying to be the kind of person who doesn't walk past suffering when I can do something about it, even if it's small, even if it doesn't fix anything. Sebastian looked at her, and his eyes were full of something she couldn't name. That's not small, that's everything. Nora got out of the car and walked to her building without looking back, but she could feel him watching her until she disappeared inside, could feel the weight of his attention like a hand pressed against her spine. She didn't sleep well that night. Sebastian didn't come to the diner the next night, or the night after that. Nora told herself she was relieved, told herself that whatever strange encounter they'd had was over, that she could go back to her life of invisible routines and small kindnesses and the grinding exhaustion of trying to survive on minimum wage. But she kept glancing at booth 7, kept expecting to see him there, watching her with those careful gray eyes. On the 4th night, Bernard called her into his office. The office was small and cluttered, smelling of old cigarettes and cheaper coffee than they served to customers. Bernard sat behind his desk, his fingers drumming against the worn wood, his expression harder than usual. "Sit down, Nora." She sat, her stomach sinking. "I've been doing inventory," Bernard said slowly, "and I've noticed some discrepancies. Food going missing, not a lot, just enough to notice over time." Nora's throat went dry. "Discrepancies? Don't play stupid. You've been taking food, giving it away. I've got witnesses who've seen you walk out of here with containers almost every night." His eyes narrowed. "You want to tell me where that food's been going?" She could lie, should lie, but the words stuck in her throat and the silence was answer enough. "There's a homeless man across the street," she said quietly. "I've been giving him leftovers, food that would have been thrown away anyway." "That's not your call to make. That food belongs to this establishment until it's in the dumpster." "It was going in the dumpster. I just gave it to someone who needed it first." Bernard leaned back in his chair, and his smile was cold. "You know what I think, Nora. I think you've been stealing from me, taking food, taking supplies, probably taking cash too when you think I'm not looking." "I've never stolen cash." "Doesn't matter. The food's enough." He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer and tossed it across the desk. "You're fired. Effective immediately. That's your final check minus the value of the food you stole. Consider yourself lucky I'm not pressing charges." The words hit like a physical blow. "Bernard, please. I have a sister. I have rent. I should have thought about that before you decided to play Mother Teresa on my dime." His voice was flat, final. "Clean out your locker. Be gone in 10 minutes." Nora stood on shaking legs. Her vision was blurring at the edges, panic rising in her throat like bile. She had $87 in her bank account. Rent was due in 6 days. Rosie needed groceries, needed her medication for the asthma that made Chicago winters dangerous, needed... "Please," Nora said, hating the desperation in her voice. "I'll pay back every penny. I'll work extra shifts. Just don't." "Get out of my diner." There was no arguing, no appeal, just the cold reality of a world that punished kindness and rewarded cruelty. Nora walked out of the office, past June's shocked face, past the cook who wouldn't meet her eyes. She grabbed her coat from the locker, her hands shaking so badly she could barely zip it, and pushed through the door into the December night. The cold hit her like a wall. The street was empty, the diner's neon sign buzzing behind her, and for a moment she just stood there, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. She'd lost her job, the only income she had, the thing standing between her and Rosie in complete disaster, because she'd fed a homeless man. The unfairness of it was crushing. The sheer stupid cruelty of a world that punished you for caring, that made kindness a luxury you couldn't afford. Nora made it half a block before she had to stop, leaning against a brick wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Panic clawed at her chest. The numbers spun in her head. Rent, food, utilities, medication, all adding up to an impossible equation with no solution. "Nora!" She spun around. Sebastian stood 3 feet away, hands in the pockets of a black overcoat, his expression unreadable in the streetlight. "What are you doing here?" Her voice cracked. "Waiting for you." "How did you—" She stopped, realization dawning cold and sick. "You knew. You knew he was going to fire me." "Yes." The admission landed like a blow. "Why? Why would you—" "Because I bought the diner 3 days ago." Sebastian's voice was quiet, controlled. "Bernard's been managing it, but he doesn't know that yet. I told him to fire you tonight." The world tilted sideways. Nora stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "You—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I needed to see what you'd do," Sebastian said. "I needed to know if you were real, if the kindness I saw was genuine or performance, if you'd compromise when the stakes got high." "Real?" Nora's voice rose, anger cutting through the shock. "You destroyed my life to see if I was real?" "I haven't destroyed anything." Sebastian pulled an envelope from his coat and held it out. "Your job is waiting for you. Triple your previous salary, full benefits. Bernard's done as of tomorrow morning. The diner's yours to run however you see fit. You can hire who you want, serve who you want, give away whatever food you think should be given away." Nora stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "You think you can just, what, test me? Put me through hell and then offer me a job like that makes it okay?" "No, it doesn't make it okay." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "But I needed to know. In my world, loyalty is bought. Kindness is weakness. Everyone has an angle. Everyone has a price. And then I watched you give away food you couldn't afford to lose, give away money you desperately needed, and I couldn't understand it. It didn't fit. I needed to know if you'd break when pressure was applied. So you applied pressure." Nora's hands were shaking with rage. "You manipulated me, watched me suffer. For what? Your curiosity? For certainty." Sebastian stepped closer, and his voice dropped. "Because people like you don't exist in my world. And if you did exist, if you were real, then maybe everything I thought I knew about how the world works was wrong. Maybe there was something worth protecting instead of destroying. I'm not some experiment for you to run. I know." For the first time, something like regret crossed his face. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I can't undo it. All I can do is offer you this." He held out the envelope again. "A job. A real one. With real pay and real benefits. The chance to do what you've been trying to do without getting punished for it." "Why? Why would you do this?" Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "Because when my daughter was dying, she asked me if I was a good man, and I couldn't answer her. I'd spent my entire life building power and control, and I didn't know if any of it made me good." He paused. "She died thinking I was, and I've been trying to figure out how to deserve that ever since." Nora felt tears burn her eyes. Not from gratitude, from fury and grief and the sheer exhaustion of surviving in a world that kept breaking her. "You can't buy redemption," she said quietly. "I know. But maybe I can create space for it to exist." She looked at the envelope, looked at him, looked at the empty street and the diner's neon sign buzzing in the distance. "If I take this," she said slowly, "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Rosie, for Vincent, for everyone who needs someone to give a damn." "I know. And if you ever manipulate me again, I walk. I don't care what you're paying. I don't care what you think you're protecting. I walk." "Agreed." Nora took the envelope. Inside was a key, a contract, and a note in precise handwriting. "You passed. Now let's see what we can build together." She looked up at Sebastian, and her voice was steel wrapped in exhaustion. "I don't trust you." "Good. You shouldn't." Sebastian's expression was steady. "But maybe we can earn it over time." The diner changed slowly, like a wound healing from the inside out. Nora kept the name. Bernard's had been there for 32 years. But everything else shifted. She hired June as assistant manager and gave her a raise that made the woman cry. brought in a new cook who actually cared about the food, who understood that the people eating it deserved dignity, even if they could only afford coffee and toast. She painted the walls a warm cream color that made the space feel less like a way station and more like somewhere you'd want to stay. And she hired Vincent. It took 2 weeks to convince him. 2 weeks of showing up across the street with coffee and conversation, of promising him that this wasn't charity, that he'd earned this, that he deserved a chance to rebuild. When he finally walked through the door in a clean shirt Nora had bought, his beard trimmed, his eyes clear for the first time in years, the entire staff stopped what they were doing and applauded. Vincent stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. Nora walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to work, Vincent." He worked in the kitchen doing prep, washing vegetables, portioning ingredients, learning the rhythms of a professional kitchen. He was slow at first, his hands shaking from years of cold and malnutrition, but he was careful, precise, grateful in a way that made Nora's chest ache. Sebastian came every morning at 6:30, never stayed longer than an hour, never interfered with how Nora ran things, just sat at the counter with his coffee and watched her move through the space like she was conducting an orchestra. Sometimes he'd help bus tables when the breakfast rush got overwhelming. Sometimes he'd talk to Vincent about nothing in particular, sports, weather, the small, safe topics that built trust slowly. Sometimes he'd just sit in silence, and the tension he usually carried would ease, just a fraction. Callum stood outside, always watching, always ready. The first time Nora had seen him, she'd been afraid. Now she understood. He wasn't a threat. He was a shield. Protection from a world that Sebastian knew better than she did. "Your boss is different here," Nora told Callum one morning, handing him a coffee and a bagel through the door. Callum's expression didn't change. It never did, but his voice was quiet. "He's different around you." "Why?" "Because you don't want anything from him. Everyone else does. Everyone's got an angle. Everyone's working him for something." Callum took the coffee. "You just want him to show up and drink coffee and not be an asshole. It's the most honest relationship he's got." Nora thought about that as she went back inside. Thought about the way Sebastian's shoulders relaxed when he walked through the door. The way he smiled, really smiled. When Vincent told a joke about his old life on the street. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like she was a puzzle he'd decided was worth solving. She didn't trust him, not completely, but she was starting to understand him, and that was more dangerous than fear. 10 weeks after Sebastian bought the diner, Frank Navarro walked through the door. Nora knew who he was before June whispered his name with fear in her voice. You didn't work in this neighborhood without learning which names carried weight, which reputations preceded arrival, like the smell of smoke before fire. Navarro controlled the waterfront, ran the gambling, managed the smuggling, distributed pain with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. He was shorter than Sebastian, maybe 5'8", with slicked back black hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. 2 men flanked him, thick-necked, dead-eyed, their hands in their pockets in a way that suggested they weren't empty. They moved through the diner like they owned it, displacing the normal customers through pure presence. Nora's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression neutral as she approached. "Table for 3? Navarro's smile widened. "Actually, sweetheart, I'm here to see the owner. I'm the manager. I can help you with whatever you need." "No, I don't think you can." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "I need to talk to Sebastian Cross. Tell him Frank Navarro's here." The way he said Sebastian's name, like he was tasting it, testing it, made Nora's chest tighten with instinctive alarm. "Mr. Cross isn't here at the moment," she said evenly. "Then I'll wait." Navarro gestured to booth 7, Sebastian's booth, and sat down without waiting for permission. His men positioned themselves strategically, one by the door, one by the kitchen entrance. The diner's energy shifted immediately, the few remaining customers finishing their meals quickly and leaving cash on the tables. Nora pulled out her phone and texted the number Sebastian had given her. Problem. Navarro. The response was immediate. 5 minutes. Stay calm. Don't engage. Those 5 minutes felt like hours. Navarro ordered coffee he didn't drink and pastries he didn't eat. He just sat there, watching Nora move through the suddenly empty diner, his smile growing with each passing minute. "You're the reason, aren't you?" he said finally, his voice carrying across the space. Nora didn't respond. "Cross buying this dump, spending time here like it's some kind of sanctuary. It's because of you." Navarro leaned back, his smile sharpening. He's going soft, losing his edge. People are starting to wonder if he's still got the stomach for the real work. And when people wonder, opportunities open up. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nora said quietly. "Sure you don't. You're just the pretty distraction. The little project that makes him feel human." Navarro's eyes glittered. But distractions are dangerous in our line of work. They make men weak, and weak men don't survive. The door opened. Sebastian walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He didn't look at Navarro. He looked at Nora, his gaze sweeping over her methodically, checking for damage, for fear, for harm. When he seemed satisfied that she was intact, he finally turned to Navarro. "You have 30 seconds to tell me why you're in my place, scaring my people." Navarro stood slowly, his smile never faltering. "Your place? This has been neutral ground for 15 years, Cross. Common courtesy says it stays that way. Not anymore. See, that's the problem." Navarro's voice remained pleasant, conversational, which somehow made it worse. "You're changing the rules, moving pieces around the board, making declarations about what's yours and what's off limits. People are confused. People are nervous. And when people get nervous, bad things happen. Then people should mind their own business." Navarro laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your business is my business when it affects the balance of power. And you've been very unbalanced lately, buying diners, hiring homeless people, playing house with waitresses." His gaze slid to Nora. "I'm here as a courtesy, to remind you what happens when men like us forget who we are." Sebastian's expression didn't change, but the air around him darkened. "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nora could feel violence building in it, could see it in the way Callum appeared in the doorway, like a ghost materializing, in the way Navarro's men shifted their weight, hands moving inside their coats. Then Sebastian stepped forward, and despite being the same height as Navarro, he somehow seemed to tower over him. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, lethal. "Let me give you some friendly advice. This diner is off limits. The people in it are off limits. You come here again, you even drive past this building, and I'll show you exactly how unbalanced I can be. And Frank?" Sebastian leaned in slightly. "You know what I'm capable of when I stop being civilized." Navarro's smile finally faded. For just a moment, something like fear flickered in his eyes. Primal recognition of a predator more dangerous than himself. "You're making a mistake, Cross." "No, you are. Because I've spent 4 years not giving a damn about anything. And now I found something I care about protecting. That makes me more dangerous than I've ever been. Because I have nothing to lose and everything to defend." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a blanket of snow. Cold, suffocating, absolute. Navarro stared at Sebastian for a long moment. Then he laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "Enjoy your little sanctuary while it lasts." He walked toward the door, his men following, but at the threshold he turned back. "She's going to get hurt, you know, because of what you are. It's inevitable." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. The diner felt like a held breath slowly releasing. Sebastian turned to Nora, and his expression softened immediately. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. He didn't touch me." "Did he threaten you directly?" "Not exactly. Just implied things." Sebastian's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. This won't happen again. You can't promise that, Nora said quietly. Your world doesn't work like that. Then I'll change my world. The certainty in his voice was absolute. This place is protected. You're protected. That's not negotiable. Nora looked at him, at the man who'd tested her loyalty by destroying her life, who'd bought a diner to create space for something good, who carried violence like a second skin but chose restraint when it mattered. What did he mean? She asked. About you. Going soft? Sebastian gestured to the counter. Sit with me. They sat side by side, coffee cooling between them, and Sebastian spoke in a voice so low only she could hear. I've been in this life since I was 16. My father's life before that. It's all I know. Control, fear, power, respect earned through violence. He paused. For years, that was enough. I was good at it. Built an empire, made people afraid to even say my name. And then my daughter got sick, and I realized that all the power in the world couldn't save her. She died in a hospital bed, and I sat there holding her hand, and I understood that everything I'd built was worthless. His hands curled into fists on the counter. After she died, I kept going, kept running the empire, kept making decisions and collecting debts and managing territories. But I was hollow, just going through the motions. He looked at Nora. And then I saw you kneel in the rain to feed Vincent, and something woke up. Something I thought had died with my daughter. The ability to see goodness as strength instead of weakness. To want to protect something instead of destroy it. Nora's throat tightened. Sebastian. Navarro's right. I am going soft. Because I don't want to be the man I was anymore. I don't want to live in a world where kindness gets you fired and cruelty gets rewarded. I want to build something different. Even if it's just one diner. Even if it's just protecting one woman who feeds homeless people in the cold. You can't protect me from everything. I can try. What if trying gets you killed? Sebastian smiled, small and sad. Then at least I'll die for something worth dying for, instead of just another territory dispute or power play. They sat in silence, the weight of his confession settling between them, like a stone dropped in deep water. I'm not your redemption, Nora said quietly. I know. You're just yourself. That's enough. If the next 4 weeks were quiet, Nora felt like Nora. She was waiting for the wind to pick up again. Every door opening made her tense. Every phone call felt like potential disaster. But nothing happened. The diner thrived. Vincent's hands grew steadier in the kitchen. June trained new waitresses. Regulars returned, bringing friends. Sebastian came every morning at 6:30 without fail. He didn't just watch anymore. He participated. Helped Vincent with prep work. Listened to June's complaints. Fixed the broken coffee machine. Nora watched him transform from visitor to participant. His shoulders relaxed. His control softened. He laughed more. Real laughter from somewhere genuine. Once, closing late with everyone gone, Sebastian helped her mop. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Of course. Why did you really buy this place? The real reason? Sebastian stopped mopping. My daughter's name was Lily. She loved diners. Said they were democratic, rich and poor eating the same food at the same counter. No hierarchy, just people. He paused. Before she died, she made me promise to do something good. Not powerful. Good. His voice cracked. I spent 4 years not knowing how. Then I saw you and I thought, maybe this was it. Nora walked over and put her hand on his. You deserve it. You don't know the things I've done. I know what you're doing now, and choosing to change is harder than never changing. Something vulnerable crossed his face. You make me want to be better. Good. You make me want to keep being myself even when it's hard. They stood in the empty diner, and for a moment it was just two broken people trying to build something whole. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Nora jerked awake, her heart already racing, and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. Unknown number. Hello? Nora Ashford? The voice was female. Clinical. Tired. Yes. Who is this? This is Chicago Memorial Hospital. Your sister Rosie was brought in about an hour ago. You're listed as her emergency contact. Nora's world stopped. What happened? There was an incident at your apartment. A fire. She has smoke inhalation and some burns. She's stable, but you need to come now. Nora was out the door before the nurse finished talking, pulling on clothes over her pajamas, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie her shoes. She called a cab, then couldn't wait for it, just started running through the December night in the direction of the hospital. Her mind was spinning. Fire, Rosie, burns, smoke inhalation. The words repeated like a mantra of terror. She made it 4 blocks before a black town car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and Sebastian's face appeared. Get in. She didn't argue, just got in, and the car accelerated smoothly toward the hospital. How did you... Nora started. I have alerts on your phone, on Rosie's, on anyone connected to you. Sebastian's voice was steady, but his hands were clenched into fists. Tell me what happened. Fire at the apartment. They said she has smoke inhalation, burns. Nora's voice broke. They said stable, but I don't know what that means. It means she's alive. It means she's breathing. Focus on that. The car moved through empty streets with illegal speed, Callum driving with the precision of someone who'd done this before. They reached the hospital in 6 minutes, and Sebastian was out of the car before it fully stopped, holding the door for Nora. She ran inside, Sebastian close behind, and gave her name at the desk. A nurse directed her to the 3rd floor, room 312. Rosie was in a bed with pale blue walls and machines that beeped steadily. She was awake, an oxygen mask over her face, bandages on her hands and forearms. Her eyes, Nora's eyes, the same dark brown, were red from smoke and tears. Nora's knees nearly gave out. Rosie, I'm okay, Rosie said, her voice muffled by the mask. I'm okay, Nora. I promise. Nora collapsed into the chair. Beside the bed, tears streaming down her face, she took Rosie's bandaged hand carefully, gently, like she might break her. What happened? Someone... Rosie's voice shook. Someone threw something through our window, a bottle with fire in it. It broke on the floor, and everything just went up so fast. I tried to put it out, but I couldn't. And the smoke... She coughed, wincing. Nora's blood went cold. Someone threw it? On purpose? Rosie nodded. The world tilted. This wasn't an accident. This was a message, an attack. Nora stood on shaking legs and walked into the hallway, pulling out her phone. But before she could dial, Sebastian was there, his face like carved stone. Navarro, he said. Not a question, a statement. You don't know that... Yes, I do. Sebastian's voice was absolutely calm, which was more terrifying than rage. This is him telling me that declaring the diner off limits means nothing if he can hurt you somewhere else. This is him proving he can still reach you. Sebastian, what are you going to do? He looked at her, and his eyes were empty of everything except purpose. What I should have done 3 weeks ago. Don't. Nora grabbed his arm. Please, don't become the thing you're trying to walk away from. Not for me. He hurt your sister. He burned your home. He crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Then draw a new line. One that doesn't end with you in prison or dead or becoming the man your daughter wouldn't recognize. Sebastian stared at her, and for a moment she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The man he'd been. The man he was trying to become. The man who wanted to unleash violence and the man who wanted to choose a different path. There has to be consequences, he said finally. Then make consequences that don't destroy you in the process. Sebastian pulled out his phone and made a call. His voice was ice cold, controlled, absolute. Callum. Navarro has 24 hours to leave Chicago. Permanently. If he's still here after that, he won't be breathing. Make that message crystal clear to everyone who matters." He paused and put the word out. The diner, Nora, her sister, Vincent, anyone connected to them. They're under my protection. Touch them and you answer to me. No negotiations, no mercy. Spread it wide. He hung up and looked at Nora. "That's the best I can do. I can't be kind to him, but I can be clear about the cost of hurting you again." Nora felt tears burn her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is my world bleeding into yours. You shouldn't have to live with this kind of fear." "Neither should you." Sebastian reached out slowly and brushed a tear from her cheek. His touch was gentle, careful. "But I chose this life. You didn't." "I chose you," Nora said quietly, "when I accepted the job. When I let you into my life. I chose this." Something broke in Sebastian's expression. "Why?" "Because I see who you're trying to be, and that person deserves a chance to exist." He pulled her into his arms then, and Nora let herself lean into him, let herself take comfort in his strength. He smelled like cedar and smoke and something indefinably safe, and for a moment, surrounded by the hospital's antiseptic smell and the fear of what had almost happened, she let herself believe that maybe they could build something good together, that maybe kindness didn't always have to lose. Navarro left Chicago within 18 hours. Word spread fast. The diner became untouchable, not through violence but reputation. Sebastian Cross would protect what he claimed. Nora and Rosie moved to a new apartment near the diner. Sebastian paid the deposits, and Nora didn't argue. Rosie needed a home. The diner grew. They added specials, started a hiring program for people coming from homelessness. Vincent became line cook, got his apartment, started dating June. He told Nora once that she'd saved his life. She hugged him. "No, you saved your own. I just gave you a chance." Sebastian came every morning. Sebastian didn't sit at booth 7 anymore. He sat at the counter next to Vincent when he was on break, and they'd talk about nothing important while Nora moved through the space she'd claimed as her own. Sometimes customers would recognize him, and their eyes would widen with fear or respect or both. But in the diner, he was just Sebastian, the guy who fixed the coffee machine, the guy who helped bus tables during rush hour, the guy who made Nora laugh with terrible jokes and made Vincent feel like he had a friend. The transformation hadn't been sudden. It had happened in small moments. Sebastian washing dishes when the dishwasher called in sick. Sebastian listening patiently to a customer's complaint about cold eggs and actually caring about fixing it. Sebastian sitting with Vincent during his break and asking genuine questions about his life, his dreams, his fears. The other staff had been wary at first. You didn't just trust a man like Sebastian Cross, but slowly they'd seen him show up, day after day, reliable, present, not demanding authority, but earning it through consistency and quiet respect. 3 months after the fire, on a Tuesday morning when snow fell softly outside and the coffee was fresh, Sebastian said something that changed everything. "I'm stepping back from the business." Nora looked up. "What?" "Delegating to Callum, creating distance." He met her gaze. "Because I want a different life. Because my daughter would want me to try. Because every morning I walk through that door and remember what it feels like to build instead of destroy." Nora felt her heart crack open. "That's terrifying." "It should be." Silence settled between them. "Can I ask you something?" Sebastian said. "Always." "That first night with Vincent, why?" Nora considered carefully. "Because being invisible taught me what it feels like to be unseen. To move through the world and have people look right through you like you don't matter, like you're just part of the scenery. And I never wanted anyone else to feel that way. Even if all I could do was see them, acknowledge they existed, give them something warm on a cold night." She paused. "Vincent reminded me of my father. Not the way he looked, but the way he'd been forgotten. My dad died alone in a hospital. The nurses said he'd been calling for us, but by the time we got there, he was gone. I wasn't there when he needed me, but I could be there for Vincent." Sebastian nodded slowly, understanding settling in his eyes. You know what I see when I look at you? Someone who makes the world better just by being in it, not through grand gestures or big changes, just through small, consistent kindness, through refusing to walk past suffering when you can do something about it. Nora's breath caught. I see the same thing when I look at you now. You're wrong. No, I'm not. Nora leaned forward, her voice gaining strength. You bought a diner to protect something good. You gave Vincent a job when everyone else saw trash. You let your guard down enough to grieve your daughter honestly. You chose change over comfort even when it terrified you. Even when your world told you it was weakness. That's not nothing, Sebastian. That's everything. His eyes shone with something that looked like hope, like possibility, like the future opening up instead of closing down. I don't know how to do this. The normal life thing, being part of a community instead of controlling it. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. Together, Nora smiled. If you want. Sebastian's smile was like sunrise. I want. 6 months later, the diner had a waiting list. They'd expanded the menu, hired more staff. Vincent had been promoted to line cook and got his own apartment. June became assistant manager. The regulars brought friends, and those friends became regulars. And every morning at 6:30, Sebastian Cross sat at the counter and drank his coffee. He'd stepped back from most of his old business, delegating to Callum, creating distance between who he'd been and who he was becoming. He invested in legitimate ventures, created a scholarship fund for kids like Rosie. Late at night, when the diner was closed, Nora and Sebastian would sit in booth 7 and talk about the future, about what it meant to build something good, about second chances and redemption and whether people could really change. I never thought I'd have this, Sebastian said one night, his hand near Nora's on the table. Peace. Purpose. Nora laced her fingers through his. You deserve it. So do you. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, hope took root, and across the street, where Vincent used to sit with a cardboard sign, there was just an empty doorway, a reminder of where it all started. Nora looked at Sebastian, at the man who'd seen her kindness and chosen to protect it. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For buying the restaurant, for giving Vincent a chance, for choosing this. Sebastian's thumb brushed her knuckles. Thank you for showing me it was possible. And in a world that punished goodness, 2 broken people built something whole, 1 cup of coffee at a time, because Nora Ashford had knelt in the rain to feed a homeless man, and Sebastian Cross had been watching.